I was incredibly sad that we never got to meet Faye. I mean, you made her sound kick-ass, and then, we didn't really get to interact with her. So why did you make that decision?
The story of Faye and Kratos meeting bears less weight when you already know everything, or when you don't know anything that's coming ahead, right? Meeting her needs to actually feel like something that you already know the story that we told here. So there's a greater weight behind who she is. She's got a mythology that's built up. So that first meeting and the period of time that they spend together, so much of it is not about fighting or action. That's the other tough part, is the work that he has to do is harder to do in a situation where you have to go into combat all the time around there, because they're both warriors who have reached a point in their life where they don't want to fight anymore because they both see through the reasons of why they've been fighting. And meeting at that time, at that exact moment, when both of them are willing to set their weapons down, right, changes fundamentally both of them. And I think, because a lot of people say, who do you identify with, what character in all of the games? And Faye was the one I identified with the most. Everybody keeps saying, so you're Kratos and your son is Atreus, and I guess what, is your wife like Faye or Freya? And I was like, actually, it's the opposite. I'm Faye, right? I'm the one who's not there. I'm the one who doesn't get to go on the adventures with my son. I'm the one who perhaps is trying very hard to make a connection with them, even from a distance, and hoping that they're patient enough for it to be done. Do this.
So it also just occurred to me that if it's written on the wall that his name is Loki, because this is the thing I've been talking to you the most about, is how the timeline works.
Yes.
She
you're digging into that one.
went to Jotunheim before he was born?
Yes.
Before?
Well,
okay.
Yeah.
And then that's all written on the wall when maybe she had named him Loki originally, but that's before he gets his...
Well, they had a discussion. So when this was sort of modeled after when my wife and I were expecting our son, we kind of had the discussion of, what will the names be, doing the voting, right? And I campaigned like hell for Han Solo Barlog, but it did not happen. I also liked Brom Barlog. I thought that was pretty cool.
That's good.
I thought, right, the alliteration, right?
But
I
you
thought
went with
maybe
Chewbacca.
right?
Yeah. Chewbacca Barlog.
Chewbacca would have been amazing, right? But that's like a little closer to like naming your kid Chalupa or something like that. So I don't know if she'd roll with that.
Also
she didn't
a good
roll
name, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. Also a very good name. But I thought I like the idea that his identity was sort of something that initially they each discussed. They each suggested a name, and she sort of assuaged and said like, okay, we'll go with Atreus. But the reality is, she always knew that the name Loki, this identity, was something he'd take on, right? That he would choose, right? You reach the end of the game, and now he's got this point where he sort of developed with the audience and with his dad as Atreus. But then he knows about this other part, right? From his mom, that she's left to him. So
I love the idea of winning any argument when you can tell the future. You're just like, yeah, it's fine. Call him Atreus.
Yeah, it's
cool.
totally going to be
totally.
Atreus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny because, like, obviously, like, Atreus as a Greek name, I guess it registered with me that it was Greek, but I never thought anything of it until, like, the very end. And I'm like, oh, duh, it is weird that he has that name. Like, it's, like, so funny. And, like, honestly, one of my favorite parts of that moment is just the story of the Atreus that Kratos knew. I thought that was such a nice touch on the cap of everything at the end of this whole journey, that, like, the significance of that name is really powerful and kind of sheds light onto Kratos'
basically
backstory.
a plot twist.
Yeah.
In a strange way that I was like, oh, what? But yeah, I was like, oh, what? But yeah, I think I do really want to talk about like how that timeline works though. So if she had just already decided it, she went to the Giants. And then I don't know who put the mural up there. The Giants did?
Giants.
Why?
Yeah. So the deeper story on all of this is that the Giants are kind of the artists, right? The craftsmen, the people who don't want to necessarily get involved in the wars. So the Aesir and the Vanir gods are always in conflict, right? They are the sort of... Vanir gods are kind of the communing with nature, stewards of magic, hippies, right? And the Aesir gods are kind of, Hunter S. Thompson's Hell's Angels, right? Bikers. And they basically conflict all the time, and the Giants kind of get sucked into it. And when Brock and Sindri created Mjolnir, Thor went on a giant killing rampage, right? Because basically he had the nuclear bomb, and it sort of upset all the balance of this. And the giants fled Midgard. And in their fleeing, they were kind of refugees in their own land, right? And they were holding on to this belief that Faye actually had told them she will be the Praetorian in Midgard, right? And let them know when it's safe to come back. And this is why, because all of this had been foretold, right? Because did anybody catch the piece right before you spread the ashes? When he's walking up and they see the markings, and Atreus comments on the markings?
Which parts?
Right at the end. Because there's so much stuff that happens at the end. Like,
Yeah,
It's like a lot.
I made it fairly dense, but this part was intentionally meant to be a little bit deeper layer, right? So, in video games, we have something called visual language, right? Which is like yellow pipes, white paint, things that are indicating to the player that you can actually climb or interact with something within the world. So in our game, we have this kind of, markings that have little triangular designs. It's not exactly runes, but it's very stylistic markings throughout the game. And I think as you play games, you just sort of think, oh, okay, those are the visual language, right?
Yeah.
Faye walked the journey first. Faye put all of the visual language throughout the entire game. Damn. And at that one moment at the end, you see the visual language with her hand, right? And
Just
he goes,
chills.
that was what she did. So she is the dungeon master of this entire experience, really.
But would she have had to do, go in the same walk all through the mines to get up to where the bridge to Jotunheim was originally? Because for her, it still would have been intact, right?
Yep.
She would have just walked through that way.
But
that's how they originally fled. So all the giants actually fled through there, but she knew all the things that were going to happen. So she was actually laying down the marker.
That's why I love Norse myth so much, because it's like that idea of Ragnarok, the idea that everyone knows what's going to happen. Yep. That whole thing with the world serpent, they all know what's coming, right. And I think that's such a fascinating...
And they sort of embrace it too. They're like, this is great. This is how life is supposed to be. So the bikers are basically saying, let's live life to the fullest. Let's drink, let's eat, let's fight, let's enjoy life, right? And maybe a little bit too much. But also in the lake, right? The writing is in yellow. That's sort of the color associated with her. Yeah. So there are a few areas in the game in which she specifically wrote something. So not all of it was written by her, but anything that is kind of in her, what we're calling her kind of cardinal color, like yellow is her color. Those are sort of messages from her.
She just has a yellow pen that just lasted a really long time.
Right.
It's a really good pen.
Tagging everywhere. She's got yellow spray paint.
I mean, she was able to predict the future, so I'll give her a cool.
He's really Midgard's worst vandal, if you think about it.
Right. Her graffiti is amazing.
That thing at the end, the sort of super secret ending, is Atreus actually sort of channeling a little bit of her power as well. So seeing a little bit into the future. So his abilities are very different from Kratos', and they start to manifest slowly after he has the breakthrough on the journey, which is that sense of understanding who he is. And each one of these things is this sort of exploration into who he is. It is removing the layers to kind of discover. And some of it we've told people, some of it we haven't. The world serpent speaks in a language that nobody can decipher, which is why we didn't put any subtitles there. So he actually says a bunch of stuff.
You kind of put subtitles, they're just all like, va.
So good.
Do you want me to spoil something for you?
Yes.
This is all about spoilers?
Yes.
All right, so in video games, in all video games really, we have a technique of communicating with the audience by changing the color or the material on certain objects to indicate this is where you need to go, i.e. bad examples would be perfect dark with the arrows on the ground. Good examples would be like yellow piping or like white paint or something like that, right? So it's called visual language in the developer parlance, right? So the visual language in this game was placed by Faye. The entire journey has visual language throughout the entire game.
The palm print.
So that our sort of design way to communicate with the audience was rationalized at the end, in that Faye was so powerful that she walked the path that you walked well before. There's actually things written, several things written throughout the journey that are in yellow. She also wrote those things. So that right there, to me, she is the most sort of powerful character within in my mind, sort of like the entire story, right? Because of how much she orchestrated all of this, right? And sort of answering what you're saying is that
We have a tendency when taking on something that is difficult emotionally to stall, right? We don't want to deal with it. Sometimes as human beings, we want to push back against it because it's gonna be hard. Whether it's physically or emotionally hard, we push back on that. And the tree selection right from the beginning was her way of saying, I know